Here we have my newest sculpture of Father Damien of Molokai, now known as Saint Damien of Molokai. I started this project 2 years ago, making several trips down to Molokai, to the peninsula of Kalapapa, where the leper colony exists. And there's still 16 patients with Hansen's disease. Leprosy, it was known as leprosy back then, back in the 1800s, but now it's known as Hansen's disease. And it was a very special piece for me to do for many reasons. Father Damien came from Belgium in the 1800s, and he was of the Order of Sacred Hearts, priests, and he was a missionary. And my father passed away when I was 6 years old, and several days later, his first cousin showed up, and it was Father Alzarella, and this was in 1968. And he was the equivalent of the vice president of the American College and Seminary School in Belgium, where Damien studied. So I had heard the story of Damien before I even arrived here in Hawaii 27 years ago. And another reason why it was so special is I thought a lot about my grandmother, because Damien's church down at Kalapapa, where he took care of the lepers, was called St. Philomena's. And my grandmother's name, she's 98 years old, is Philomena. And she's one of the most saintly women I know on this earth. So with those thoughts in mind, I made several trips down to Kalapapa in the last 2 years and walked around the peninsula and read all the books that are available and literature on Father Damien. And one of the things that impressed me so much was the determination and resolve and the strength and compassion of this man and the resilience. He volunteered to go to Kalapapa and take care of the lepers there. At the time, there were about 800 lepers, and many of them were children. And when I was down there walking around the colony, I thought about these children that were taken from their families around Hawaii because they had this disease and sent to this, basically, it was a prison. Kalapapa was isolated by a 2,000-foot cliff, so nobody could leave. And the waters around this peninsula were treacherous, so they couldn't swim away. And besides that, they were suffering from a horrible disease. So I felt it very important to have a leper child in this sculpture next to Damien, and Damien with his arm on the child's shoulder in a very protective, loving pose. And then depicting the pain and the sorrow and the shame in this child, because the leprosy and the people with that disease they felt ashamed to have it, because it was a very misunderstood disease at the time. So it was very important to show the pain and the sorrow as well as the shame. And so I chose to depict the child cloaked, hiding his face, perhaps wiping away his tears also. And in the folds of the drapery, I wanted to depict the pain and the sorrow. And in Damien, I wondered what could have made a person give his life, essentially, in taking care of these people in such an isolated place. And one of the things I learned in reading about Damien was one of the books that was written during his time called The Lepers of Molokai. And it spoke of his growing up and his mother reading the stories of the martyrs and saints to he and his siblings at bedtime. So here, that was one of the keys I felt, was that he grew up listening to these stories of heroism and self-sacrifice. And it's no wonder that he grew up wanting to do something wonderful and give his life to helping humanity in some way. So I depicted Damien, my feelings were this was his second day on Molokai. And he felt when he arrived there and after he surveyed what he was up against, that he felt that everything he experienced and learned up till that point was in preparation, in preparing him for the work he was going to do for the rest of his life in taking care of these people down at Kalapapa and protecting and taking care of these children from the evils there. I chose to have Damien looking towards his left at the giant he was facing, because evil comes from the left. Even the word left in Latin means sinister. So like Michelangelo's David is looking towards his left at the giant he is facing. I chose to pose Damien looking towards his left at the colony of Kalavao, at the giant and evil he was facing. And on his right side he has his Bible, which the right side is protected by God. And on the right side of Damien, standing on this cliff, is the most beautiful place and one of the most beautiful creations of God, which is the Pali coast of Molokai. And the balance between Kalavao and the horrors there, and the most beautiful place in the world on his right, and having that balance there, I felt was very important in this in depicting this moment. So one of the things that I learned about Damien was that he was characterized as very unkept. He didn't care so much about his looks. And so that's why I chose to have his top button unbuttoned, his belt a little bit askew, his robe a little bit tattered and worn, because he lived and worked in that robe. And he built some 13 churches here in Hawaii. So he had very strong hands because he did most of that work himself. So that's why I wanted to show the strength in those hands, and also the strength and compassion, determination in his gaze. So those are some of the thoughts, my thoughts, that went into this sculpture, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed creating it. It was an honor.